Hey, everybody. Welcome to HSMAI's Recovery Connections. I'm really glad that you're here. I'm Julie Jones from the HSMAI headquarters team. We've got a great program lined up for you today. Our Marketing Advisory Board has deliberately designed today's session to make the most of your time. First, we'll hear actionable insights and really great thought leadership from our panel of experts. Then we'll have some time for interactive roundtables for you to hear from and learn from hotel professionals like yourselves who are driving the industry's recovery. So I just have a couple quick announcements to make, a little housekeeping that will go really quickly. So mark your calendar for our next installment, which is 2 weeks from today after Thanksgiving here in the US. It's Pivoting to Survive. We'll hear from a series of customers about what they're seeing in terms of innovation of sales teams and what you can learn from those customers and their experience with your sales efforts. So definitely not one to miss. Like with all of our live events, our confidentiality and antitrust guidelines apply. So no talking of pricing, expenses, doing business with a certain supplier, et cetera, when we get into our roundtables. If you need any tech support while we're together, use the little pink circle in the bottom left corner of your screen, and tech support is standing by. And when we do move to roundtables in about half an hour or so, remember, it only works if everyone takes part in the conversation. Turn on your camera, turn on your mic, and know that it's a judgment-free zone. So if you didn't do your hair today, I don't care. Get in there and learn from your peers. It's a great opportunity to get some new perspectives. When our panel starts, you can use the Q&A chat to the right-hand side of your screen. So ask your questions, and we'll be keeping an eye on that and have some time to answer your questions. And without further ado, we have today's thought leaders. So Jessica, Stuart, Tammy, and Dan, will you turn on your cameras and mics and join me on the stage? Excellent. Okay, we just need, it's okay, now we're just waiting for Stuart.
Sure.
Perfect. He's in the witness protection program there.
There we go.
There he is. All right. Well, Jessica, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'll sort of be waiting behind stage, if you will, if you guys need anything.
Excellent. Thank you, Julie, and hello, everyone. My name is Jessica Davidson, and I have the pleasure of leading the digital team at Wyndham Hotels and Resorts. And most of you likely know Wyndham, but for those who don't, Wyndham is the world's largest hotel franchising company by number of properties, with approximately 9,000 hotels in roughly 90 countries. And some of the brands you may recognize are La Quinta, Days Inn, Microtel, Wyndham, of course, Super 8. So happy to be here with you today. And one of the things that I love about my role and love about being in this industry is the ability to participate in HSMAI's Marketing Advisory Board. And I feel really privileged to be here today with 3 exceptional Marketing Advisory Board colleagues. And what's so exciting about this group is the roughly 60 years of collective hospitality marketing experience that they bring to the table. So we're going to have a great discussion today. The focus is about efficiency, effectiveness, and agility. So in today's world, marketers are really faced with tough choices. We have to decide where we're going to invest and where we're going to dial back. We also know that being very data-driven is important, especially now. So today we're going to focus on the best practices around those principles and how to be really agile. So hopefully you'll take away a lot from this discussion. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our esteemed panelists for a round of introductions. So Tammy, please take us away with introductions.
Awesome. Thank you, Jessica. Hi, everyone. My name is Tammy Carlisle. I am head of hospitality at Milestone Inc. Milestone is a digital marketing agency and a software provider that focuses on helping hotels organize and amplify their business information, which is a fancy way for saying help you find business and get customers attracted to you. I am honored to be here as well today, and to not only serve on the panel with my fellow esteemed Marketing Advisory Board colleagues, and to serve on the Marketing Advisory Board. So I'm going to turn it over to Stuart for his introduction.
Thank you, Tammy. Hey there, everyone. I'm Stuart Butler. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Fuel, and we are a software company that provides direct booking software and mobile apps. So booking engines, mobile apps, CRM, that kind of stuff. And we have a digital agency as well. And then we also host the industry's #1 podcast, the Fuel Hotel Marketing Podcast, where we give tangible tactics, tips, and tricks to drive direct bookings. So hopefully we'll be able to spill some of the beans today. And I'm going to hand it over to Dan.
All right, thanks, Stuart. Hello, everyone. I'm Dan Waxman. I was formerly Senior Vice President of Marketing and Distribution for a regional hotel brand and management company. I did that role for about a dozen years, and then I recently left about 18 months ago, pre-COVID, to start my own business, which is called Sasato, and we focus on hotel marketing, distribution, and technology. And the way I describe my business is I help hotels make decisions and get shit done.
Awesome. Well, Dan, let's stick with you for a moment. We'll start our first question. If you could kind of kick us off, with so many years leading digital marketing and distribution for hotel brands, and now at the helm of your own business, as you just said, what advice can you give marketers regarding how to think differently during the crisis? So how can businesses avoid the potential pitfall of becoming too reactive or short-sighted today?
Yeah, that's interesting. Thanks for that. And I think I might make up a majority of those 60 years on this call. I think Stuart might have started when he was like 12 or something like that. It's a really good question, and it's actually something that I've spoken to a lot of clients and colleagues about. And I mean, the bottom line, like a lot of things in COVID, is it's tough, you know, because it's sort of this dichotomy of where now is the perfect time to try new things. Now's the perfect time to make big changes, whether it be in your marketing plans or your technology or the partners that you're using. So that's on the one hand. And then on the other hand, you probably have limited staff. You probably have limited budget. Obviously, there's not a lot of business coming through the hotel. So, you know, what are you going to do, right? The hotel's in survival mode, potentially. A lot of hotels are in survival mode. So how do you leverage that, right? Those two different things that are happening. You know, I like the expression where they say fortune favors the bold. And I think it's always the case. In any downturn that happens, you always say, I wish I would have thought of that. Or I wish I would have done that. I wish I would have had the guts to do that. And I think now's the time to sort of do that. And you may have to do it with some constraints, but you still can do things. And you need to be more aggressive in marketing, and you need to be more aggressive in the things that you're doing. And I think you need to be comfortable with the fact that the results may not be immediate, but you're sort of planting the seeds and laying the groundwork for enabling you to come out of it a lot quicker than everybody else.
That's great. So really looking at it as an investment and kind of not making the intentional decision to not be short-sighted, to think forward, and really kind of invest for the future.
Yeah.
Is what I'm hearing.
Yeah. And I think one of the key challenges to that, and I think Stuart and Tammy can probably weigh in on it, is that it's convincing who's ever writing the check, right? The GM or the owner, that, you know, okay, this may not achieve immediate results, but it's going to position us better for when things do come back. And there are things that will, you know, it will have some result. Nothing's going to get you back to, you know, 100% occupancy. It's just not going to happen, right? So how do you spend money on the existing business that's there, but plant the seeds for the future?
Great, thank you. So Tammy, as head of hospitality for Milestone, you have had the opportunity to work with thousands of businesses to help drive traffic to their direct channels. In addition, you self-report that the word schema is your favorite word, which is so telling. Can you give the group a little bit of an understanding around best practices for SEO, some things as connecting with what Dan was saying, things that you could be focused on right now to kind of secure your footing and position yourself for the future?
Of course. So I have 90 minutes for this one question, right? Because okay, so I'm gonna take kind of a dual prong approach as far as a couple things that are more immediate and a couple things that kind of, to Dan's point, position well for long term, because you really have to be thinking about both of those right now. And I take a step back on the SEO front. SEO really boils down to two things: the things you do to your website and the things you do outside of your website. It's that simple. And then within your website, there's two components, right? There's the technical, all the schema. I won't spend a ton of time on schema, but all the technical things, and then the non-technical or the content things. So let's start with content, because that's something that whether you're a branded property or an independent property, you have some level of control over. Biggest thing right now, there are still hotels out there that do not have accurate content on their website. Right? They don't talk about what's going on in their market, what's going on at the hotel. So having that kind of information, having accurate, updated information, talking about the things to do, any events that are happening, because in some market events are actually still happening. I wouldn't know. I'm in California, nothing's happening. But, in other areas of the country it is. So having that, having FAQs, answering questions. Search has really evolved. Some of you are older.
Or is that just me?
What? Oh, sorry, Dan.
As she's coming back, I could add to that. Is she frozen on your screen? Okay. So as she's coming back and going live again, I can add to that is I teach a digital marketing class, and it's interesting to see when we go through it that there are just some of the basic things of SEO that people aren't doing. And it's amazing. And now if you have time, it's time to clean that stuff up. I know. I'll give you just a silly example, which is a real example. People haven't claimed their Google My Business listing, or they haven't updated it with more current information. And that's a minor thing that they can do and fix quickly that's going to impact their SEO. Hey, Tammy, I just fill in some space that way.
No, and that was perfect, because that was actually when on the content front, that was something I was going to absolutely mention is Google My Business, right? There's so many hotels that don't have accurate information there, don't talk about open or closed at a minimum, but the attributes. You talk about your indoor pool, but I can't use your indoor pool, or I can't use your fitness center, and highlighting those things. And Google's really done a lot to make it easier to allow messaging, amenities, talking about what's going on within COVID. So those kinds of things from a content perspective, and the FAQs and answering questions, because we've gone from the early days of like Ask Jeeves to shorter queries to now people asking things in the form of a question often. So answering those questions on your site. Then on the technical side, there's a couple of things. One, mobile. And I remember someone making a comment like, I can't believe people are talking about mobile being important. That was important 10 years ago. And I would argue it's still important today, and even more important. And if you don't have a good mobile presence, that's a great starting point. But there's also something coming up that you may or may not know about called Core Vitals Update. And Google started talking about it back in May. Google does not talk about their updates very often unless they're big. And they originally we thought it was going to be January, February. Now they've pushed it out. They said it's going to roll out around April, May timeframe. So it's a great time to be thinking about what do we need to do as we're coming out of this pandemic to street fight for every last ounce of business we can, to make sure that we're conforming to the Core Vitals updates and those types of things. And there's a lot of content online, but happy to have a conversation with anybody that wants to about that. But that's kind of where I would start from an SEO standpoint, and then obviously schema and all the other fun things.
To get that word in, because it's your favorite word.
It
schema. Is. Awesome. But yeah, you touched upon some really great points, local listings, that you gave a presentation at HSMAI Marketing Week last time about that 0 click. So having the answers to those questions readily available is so critical. So thank you.
Of course.
Okay, Stuart, you lead Fuel, an organization focused on comprehensive marketing solutions, and a vertical within Fuel is paid media. So planning and executing media needs to be both precise and agile, especially during these times. So what are some of the things that you find in these COVID days working the hardest for you? And where would you say it would be okay to dial back a little bit?
Yeah, so we recently did an episode of our podcast on this specific topic, and we had 5 hosts on the show, and we each went and wrote our own list of the things we should be investing more in and the things we should be cutting. And so, and we kind of look at paid and earned and owned media in the same bucket, although the tactics might be different. The strategies a lot of times are the same, like the types of campaign we're running, the messaging, the psychology of it, in going back to what Tammy was saying about things like content and people not updating their websites to talk about COVID. you've really got to approach all of this from the perspective of the guest. And the guest should always be your focus. And so if someone comes to your website or sees an ad and you're not addressing the reality, or you're not addressing the fears, or you're not addressing the questions that they might have, then you're failing at trying to convince them to stay with you. And to Dan's point earlier, we're trying to do a little more than we used to do, because now we've all become sort of destination marketing organizations, right? Because it used to be that our local CVBs or DMOs or even the big brands would promote, and the OTAs would promote a destination, and we would just sit there and lavish in the sunlight and collect the intent that existed, right? We'd throw out an ad on our brand, or like some generic words related to our location, and just turn on Google Ads and it would just work, or turn on meta search and it would just work. And the demand's not there. And the challenge we're facing is the demand that is there is way more competed for, because we've got all these properties. We primarily focus in, say, leisure transient, right? And so you've got properties that's their core business. But then you've got properties that have been traditionally more heavily business focused, or traditionally more groups and meetings focused. Well, groups and meetings and business travel isn't really happening. So leisure is really the only thing you can target right now in a meaningful way. And you've got to do it in a more granular, more aggressive way, so that you can build up your portion of the business. And everyone's super competing. So I would say, to answer your question, things that really drive more direct bookings, we've had a ton of success with meta search, both Google Hotel Ads, TripAdvisors, Trip Connect platforms have been just growing phenomenally over the last 5 years, and COVID's been a real accelerator for those. I think it's a phenomenal area to focus in. Things like display is something I've never been a huge fan on, because, and Dan and I could nerd out for a while talking about the attribution models that some display networks use, but it's something that isn't as effective right now. I think you've got to try to generate demand in other ways. For us, it always comes back to the core 3 pillars of what you should be focused on. And this bubbled up to the surface in the episode that we talked about. Number 1 is your content, the stuff you're publishing, the ads you're creating, the landing pages you're sending people to, making sure that you're answering the questions, to Tammy's point and Dan's point, making sure that you're addressing anything and everything you can think of. And if you don't know what it is you need to be addressing, then you're not talking enough to your guests. Go talk to your guests a lot more. So making sure you have a good foundation of content. A lot of people say content is king, right? That's been the case for 20 years. It will always be the case. Every touch point you have is content. You got to make sure you get that right. The next thing is the customer experience. And the experience is how they feel, what they perceive when they interact with your brand, whether it's an ad, an email, a mobile app, a booking engine, and on property as well, making sure that the guests that travel right now are having a great experience in every touch point, in real world and digital, because these guys are pioneers. And the few people that are traveling, we're getting to the point now where the stigma of travel is gone, and people are willing to travel and willing to see other people travel and get excited about travel again. The last data that we saw, 53% of people have already traveled since mid-March. So we know the majority of people have traveled. 85% of people are willing to travel right now. So, and we'll see what happens after Thanksgiving. It could get kind of crazy with a lot of people traveling. So making sure they have a great experience and using them as pioneers to show other people that traveling exists. And then making sure finally that you're using your data, making sure you're collecting as much insight as you can from your guests, surveys, talking to them, and putting that data into some kind of system that you can leverage it, and continuing to adjust and adapt the everything you're doing, every campaign. So content, and then customer experience, and then data. Those are the kind of 3 pillars that we're working on and focused on. There's a lot of ways that can manifest, but if you focus on doing those 3 things right, you're going to be in good shape, I think.
Can I just jump in on the content side of things? Because I so agree with that. This is the opportunity for hotels to really, push those direct bookings, because you have the ability to get the information on your site very specific to your hotel, very specific to your destination. That's going to enable people to understand what's going on better than the OTAs or any other third party. In addition to that aspect of it, it's so important to get your content right now in terms of your messaging, I'll just give you an example. I was on a website, a major brand website recently, looking at a hotel in Bangkok. I just was looking something up. I was curious. And then they sent me an email that I should book my trip. Don't, you left something in the cart kind of messaging. Meanwhile, you can't travel to Thailand now, right? It's illegal, right? You basically can't. But they sent me that message. So, those things are not aligned. And that messaging needs to be aligned, whether it be in your email marketing, your display marketing, your search, or anything.
Yeah, now's a good time to do that audit, right? Going through as a customer, make a booking and search the site and seeing every touch point. That guest experience is critical. And now's a good time to really shake that up. And to your point, Dan, I think if we don't, as a I love the OTAs. I think they play a really important role in the ecosystem. And I'm not a basher of the OTAs per se, but I think we could do a better job as an industry of driving more direct bookings. And if you look at the opportunity that's in front of us right now, the OTAs aren't spending as much on advertising because that's where most of their business comes from is paid advertising. We should take the opportunity. So it goes back to what Tammy was saying about making sure that you have a blazing fast, mobile-friendly website, and not just a website, but the entire mousetrap, right? Making sure that it's not disjointed between the website and the booking engine. And I say that a little self-serving because we provide a booking engine technology, but if you've got a guest that can book right now and is willing to book, you need to do everything you can to reduce friction and get out of their way. And the booking engine is a major important part of that. So if you have a slow booking engine or a booking engine that doesn't work on mobile, now is definitely the time that you should be reevaluating that. There's a lot of good products out there.
I 100% agree. Oh, sorry, Jessica. I was just going to say, not only do I agree, I think for some people, at least in the audience, they're probably going, I'm covering desk shifts. I'm doing 50 other things. I mean, I don't have time to audit.
Yeah.
Buy a friend a cup of coffee that's not in the industry and ask them to go through your website and ask them to make a booking and ask them for their feedback. You will learn so much information. We tend to get so caught up because we've done it for years and we know, and this makes perfect sense. And then you get someone that's not from the industry on and you find out a lot more. And there are some things that you could probably fix very easily that you would never have even seen if you didn't get a friend who's not in the industry and ask them to spend 10 minutes on your site for you.
Yeah, that's a great practical recommendation. And I would say also, as you navigate the digital world, as we are all becoming more digital first, and everything's accelerated so quickly, and you're spending time on websites and digital applications outside the vertical, think about how customer expectations are changing and how they apply to your hotel experience. So that's something I always try to pay attention to in terms of seeing the competitive landscape both inside and outside of hospitality, but mobile first. I mean, it resonates so well. We just launched a mobile app, and it's an exciting point and time for digital acceleration and adoption. Awesome.
Yeah.
So through this, we talked about some tried and true types of things. Stuart, you talked about meta search being so important, the guest experience, content I'm hearing. Are there any new or novel campaigns or channels that have emerged during this crisis that have surprised you? And if so, are any fads or do any have staying power?
Who's that aimed at?
So anything like, for example, well, not to give an example, but was there a campaign that resonated for you, or something that, display isn't a great example there. You already said that that's not where you would focus.
So I think in general, what I've really admired is, and folks have kind of copycatted this a lot, but the folks that are scrappy, the ones that are just trying things and seeing what sticks, because one of the things I've learned, doing 35 weeks of a longitudinal leisure travel study that we conducted and observing the P&Ls of some of our clients that we work with, is it doesn't matter where you're located, it doesn't matter what your core business makeup was, it doesn't matter who your guest has traditionally been, it matters how you've responded to this. Like that is the difference between surviving and not in this, is how have you responded? Have you been scrappy? And when I say scrappy, I'm kind of combining the two meanings of the word. It's feisty, like Scrappy-Doo from Scooby-Doo, but it's also being made up of smaller parts, right? Scraps. And when you kind of combine those together, you get this word scrappy, which basically means you're willing to try things and adjust and and do it a little bit faster and a little more aggressively than the competition. And so you've seen this from smaller properties that have rented out their group space to local schools to host virtual learning, or to folks that are doing work remotely. You've even seen it at the flags that have done like Marriott's done a good job with their day, stay, and play passes, where they kind of have this, it's the same inventory, but they're merchandising it different ways. And so they're saying you can either stay from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. the same day, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. the next day, and you get different benefits and different value from this. And it's selling the same inventory, but in slightly different ways to different audiences. And I think that's the key, right, is understanding that there isn't one audience anymore. A friend of all of ours, Lauren Gray, often says you've got to make your rice bowl. You've got to build your whole bowl of rice of business. And it used to be you could get a spoonful of rice at a time in the different marketing channels. Now you can't. You've got to do it grain at a time. You've got to be more granular and try things. And this is why you see, I don't know if you saw this today, I read it on Hotel Marketing, folks like TripAdvisor are really trying to, a completely new revenue stream, and they're going to start with this members club, which is $99 a year, and you get exclusive discounts. Like, this is something they've not really tried before. You see folks like Amazon coming out with their VR experiences, paid VR. So I think trying things, but not losing sight of the fundamentals. Like do the things that work really well, do them first, but then experiment, try things, see what happens, and be willing to be agile, shift very, very quickly. I think that's what I've been impressed at.
Yeah, I agree. I used to tell my team when I try to get them to think outside of the box when they got into analysis paralysis, is just say, just try shit. Let's just try some stuff, right? And what a better time to try shit than right now? What are you going to do, right? You're gonna mess up your occupancy? Probably not, right?
Yeah.
You're going to try different things and see what works, and then optimize on top of that. And the things that I've seen work really well, or that sort of got me potentially excited about staying in hotels, is when the marketing team is working with the ops team, and figuring things out, like Stuart was talking about different ways to utilize your inventory. I saw a cool one where they got a very good local band that they played in this area that was in the center, and you can see them from the balconies. And they gave people a bottle of wine, and you can watch the show from the balcony. I mean, how cool is that, right? You stay overnight. And so these are the kind of things where you sit there and you talk to ops, and what are all these things that maybe it's a crazy idea, maybe it's not, but this is the time to try it. And to your point, Jessica, some of this stuff will stick, and some of it is just total COVID related, but some of it will stick.
Yeah, I think, Dan, you kind of remind me of the movie What Women Want, right? Imagine Mel Gibson trying on the lipstick and pulling on the pantyhose. Remember, he was having to try all the products, right? The chances of you falling in a bathtub right now and getting electrocuted are pretty darn small. To Dan's point, you're not going to screw up your occupancy. If anything, you might lift it. So, I love those. I've seen a couple where they put concerts on outside the balcony rooms. Micro weddings is a huge focus right now, just to give a couple ideas to maybe start your creative juices flowing. The whole work from anywhere, school from anywhere. I'm on the fence whether that long term is the strategy or just a right now. I have pros and cons in my mind. I think we'll wait and see. We've also seen some hotels, especially new builds that are like just starting and like really trying to, get cash flow, do some buy now, stay later promotions where it's like gift cards and you get, you spend $500, but you actually get $750 or, something along those lines where there's a value to the consumer, to me, and actually giving you money now. So you've got that cash flow to survive, to be scrappy. By the way, I love your analogy. I'm gonna steal that. I think it's fantastic, and yet at the same time, like, keep them going and give a benefit to the consumer. So just a few ideas to get people's creative juices flowing. But I'm sure talk with your ops team, talk with your front desk, talk with everyone on your housekeepers. Even come up with ideas that you can implement that will make a difference.
Yeah, pay attention to what other folks are doing, because every idea is just a derivation of someone else's idea, right? It's an evolution a lot of times. So pay attention to what the rest of the industry is doing. To join communities like HSMAI and share your thoughts and what's worked for you, and you'll learn. Maybe right after this panel discussion, you could join the roundtables and ask people what they've seen that's working. You could glean some nuggets from that. So talking to folks is probably the best way you can learn what's going to potentially work for you.
That's great. These are all good insights.
When Tammy mentioned that Mel Gibson thing, I was afraid I left my Zoom on after the last call.
My goodness. So Dan, taking a data, we talked about being very data driven, and since I met you and you were part of the marketing advisory board, several times you've talked about marketing and attribution modeling and measuring, and so we talk about the trials and tribulations of this and how there's no one single right way to measure, and how difficult it is sometimes even to explain what the options are that are out there. So as we implement some of these strategies, what are some of the things folks should be looking at to determine success of a given campaign? And are there any things to avoid?
Is this a question for me or?
Yeah, for you, Dan. Yeah.
So one of the reasons I joined the marketing advisory board was to figure out how people were doing attribution, and talked to a lot of smarter people than me, and then I realized nobody knew what they were doing. There's, a lot of people understand it, but it's all over the place of how they market. And I've come to the conclusion that there's not going to be this magic bullet where everybody's going to have the same attribution model. We're going to be looking at things the same way. So I mean, the recommendation that I make to my clients is figure out what attribution you want to use, stick with it, create your baseline around that, and then you develop a plan to grow that. And even probably more important then is to make sure that your vendors and your partners are using the same attribution model, because nothing's worse than going into a meeting where you invite your vendor and your CEO or your GM is there, and you're explaining that the campaign that you did internally was 10 to 1 and theirs was 100 to 1, but they're using some bizarre attribution model that gives them credit for everything, right? So getting everybody on this, deciding what your attribution model is, being consistent, baseline in it, and ensuring that everybody else is on it, I think is an important aspect.
Yeah, let's be honest, right? Attribution theft is real. People will claim as much credit for as much as they can. A lot of vendors in the space are guilty of that. So I think you've got to make sure not only do you understand an attribution model, but maybe look at multiple, depending on the situation, and understand what the purpose of it is, right? The purpose isn't to have 100% precision in decision making. It's to inform the decisions you make tomorrow so that you're smarter about it than you would have been without the data. So, whether you're using a J shape or an L shape or a U shape, it doesn't matter what you use as long as, one, you understand it, two, you believe it, and three, to Dan's point, you're consistent with it. You don't want to be comparing these guys with a J shape to these guys with a U shape, because it's not apples to apples. So I personally am a big fan of having multiple attribution models and knowing what the strengths and weaknesses are. Some are going to be more heavily weighted towards early top of funnel campaigns. Some are going to be much more favorable to end of funnel campaigns and last click analytics. So you've got to just, as long as you're educated on what they mean, what their pitfalls are, what their strengths are, and then you can kind of come up with a mix that works for you. And I don't know if everyone's aware of this yet, but the whole world of attribution is going to get exploded in a short time here, because Google Analytics is fundamentally changing. They've re-architected the technology from the ground up. Google Analytics 4 is going to replace what we now call Universal Analytics, and it measures things completely different. If you're focused on metrics like bounce rate doesn't exist in this new platform. It just doesn't exist. They look at things like engagement rate, which to me is a much better metric than bounce rate ever was, because bounce rate is very misleading. You can't infer why someone left. You may have answered their question, so a high bounce rate might be great. But analytics is something that no one's figured out. No one has the silver bullet, to Dan's point. But the more you talk to other folks, again, the more you're going to learn and the more you can apply it to your own business. But you've got to be comfortable with it. Don't rely on data from other people. Don't let other people tell you what they did. That's just foolish. Try to make sure you're measuring people by the same standards.
Well, and I think, good point, Stuart, align your standards. What are your standards? What are your KPIs, right? Making sure that you understand what the goals are and how you're going to measure up front so that you hopefully see those results, but that your partner, you, at your asset management, everyone's on board. Just talking to an asset manager the other day that the property's all excited. They spent 10 grand on a project and, we had 100,000, lift in impression share. but what did that do for so there was a mismatch of alignment on KPIs. And so then it doesn't matter how you measure that. If you're not measuring the right things and understanding the KPIs that are important to ownership, to the brand, to your management company, to your consultant, everyone's aligned. It doesn't matter what attribution model you're using, you're going to have problems.
Yeah, and I think that's, one of the sayings we say on the podcast a lot, and this is Melissa. I'm going to quote Melissa. You can't put you can't put some of these metrics in the bank, right? It's only cash that goes in the bank. It's only bookings that really matter. So things like impressions or Facebook followers, you can't put impressions and Facebook followers in the bank. It's a vanity metric that people get excited about. But at the end of the day, if you should start with the end in mind, right? It's one of the 7 healthy habits. Always start by saying, what does success look like? What kind of return am I expecting for this to be something I want to continue? And at the end of the day, we're really using attribution to compare this campaign to this campaign so that we can say next year, I need to increase budget here and decrease it here. Like, that's really the primary reason for attribution modeling. So as long as I have enough data and I can compare these two guys, I know where my budget needs to flow next year as I'm planning, and really not next year, but in real time as we see performance.
Awesome. These are excellent insights. So Tammy, we covered a lot of tactics and best practices. In order to effectively implement actions, I think you were touching upon it just there, we need stakeholder buy-in, right? How do you have that conversation and demonstrate success so that you can get that investment? So are there, in your experience, any systems or processes you can recommend to the group to help build a case?
Yeah, and that's, I think we in some respects, we answered that to a little bit, but yeah, it really boils down to knowing what your KPIs are up front, knowing what's important to ownership, so that you can have those conversations. You can go in showing them, hey, I want to spend this money, but based on everything I've seen, and I know that ROI, I'm just going to use some simpler ones. ROI is really important to you. We anticipate, based on my conversations with the partner we're working with and everything, that you're going to see a 5-to-1, a 10-to-1, a 500, whatever the number, but know that up front. Ask those questions. And to Stuart's point, vanity metrics are great, but I 100% agree with Melissa, and I have heard her say this on the podcast, right? Like, impression share does not grow your bank account. It can help lead people down a funnel to purchase, but at the end of the day, you have to understand what's important to that owner. And I tell you, most owners don't care about impression share. So you need to be able to educate them, know what your KPIs are, metrics, and then educate them through along the way. And that's usually, look, in some scenarios, there are things going on you don't know about. You're not going to get them to give you more dollars, right? We've all been in situations where it's like, this is what you've got. And so in that case, the other thing I would say is know every line item in your budget. Know what it is. And people are going, duh. I've seen it so many times. Like, what's that $500,000? Oh, I don't know. Like, what do you mean you don't know? Right? Know every line in your budget for marketing and be able to explain it and how it fits into your bigger picture. And you're going to be much more successful. And I think having a good partner that can help you, most of us know how to at least help craft that story and can help you put something together that's at least going to give you a fighting chance of getting that buy-in from whoever you need to get sign off on to get the dollars to do the things you want to do. And then always go back after the fact, right? So they give you money, great. Go back in 3-6 months and show them how successful things have been, because if you can show you've got a good track record, that one mistake or that one thing that didn't work isn't going to get you thrown off the island, right? Like, it's like, okay, we tried this, it failed, fail fast, fail frequently, right? And then move on. But hey, look at these other 10 things we did that worked well. Let's talk about the next 10 things we're going to do.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point is understanding the value that each campaign, each channel, each, everything does. It is a defensible position, right? Because a lot of people are in a situation early in COVID where there was panic and budgets got slashed. In the first place, 99% of the time, the first place that gets cut is marketing. And yet every study that's ever been done out there says it's the last place you should cut. And you think about it, when you're opening a new property, it's one of the first places you invest, right? Because you've got to drive demand. So it's tough, right? Because when you're looking down the barrel of the COVID-19 gun, saying that I shouldn't cut marketing is is a challenge. You might intellectually know it, but when it comes down to it, making that decision is tough. The properties that I've seen navigate this the best are the ones that had marketing attribution figured out, the ones that could go to ownership or go to the folks that were writing the check and say, if you do that, here's what will happen. Like, we know the tangible results that each of these things does. And I can cut $1,000 here or $10,000 there, but this is what it will do to ultimately to your bottom line. And so if you can defend why you're spending money on every channel, then you're going to be in a much better, stronger position. Your property is going to be more successful because you're not going to pull back, willy-nilly because you have to pull back. You're going to pull back in areas that don't affect the bottom line quite so much.
Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah, I also think you need to sort of draw a line, because not everything is going to lead to direct revenue, and it's going to lead to revenue over time. So you need to be able to draw that line. And just to give sort of an example of what that might be, is maybe you're doing an engagement campaign, which owners don't like because they don't see revenue attached to it. But the goal of the campaign is to get opt-in emails, let's say. Okay, then you can show the owner, if I get 1,000 opt-in emails, we know that 10% of them are going to convert over this period of time. So yeah, it's not going to impact us today, but we know historically that this is going to generate revenue for us over time. They may not buy it, but at least you're showing that there is at some point an ROI on what you're doing.
Yeah.
Excellent insights. So I'm looking at the time, and I know we've gone a little over, but are there any questions from our audience?
I'm coming. Got to get my mic back on. So that was great, guys. I mean, I'm not a full-time marketer, but I was definitely taking a ton of notes because there's even a lot that HSMAI can learn there. We had a couple questions in here, and maybe just in the interest of time, why don't we attack one of them? And it is, if you could only do 3 things to market your hotel today, what would they be? 3 things. And what if, Dan, Stuart, and Tammy each pick one? Like, what is your top thing? And don't copy the person in front of you. So who goes first?
Before anybody steals it, since I only have one, market to a database.
That would probably be
activate your database.
Yeah. Assuming you've been doing a good job of collecting data, I think you're right, Dan. Like your own data is the people that have traveled with you before is probably the number one thing. And if I was going to cheat, I'd say you need a super mobile friendly, fast website that's SEO friendly with a super mobile first booking engine that has attribution tracking or input in. So having a great mousetrap would probably be my number 2 right behind the CRM.
Yeah. I would call that laying your foundation.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna hope that everyone's already done that.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna say, obviously marketing to your database is important, having that great strong foundation, and then making sure that your content and your information is accurate and up to date, both on those channels, in your emails, on your OTA distribution, your Google My Business, your being local, like Yelp, right? Wherever TripAdvisor, they're talking about you. Is it accurate? Is it up to date? Is it consistent?
Yeah, that's great. Very good advice. And I know so many are doing so much more with so much less, that prioritize the most urgent, important things is increasingly important. So if you didn't get your question answered, our panelists will be at the speakers table when we move to the round table. So when you look at the floor plan, when we go back to the tables, it's the bottom right corner. Just pop over and talk to them. Just double click. It'll move you over to the table, and they'll be there to chat and answer questions one-on-one. So with that, I just want to thank you all so much. It's my pleasure to have you as part of our marketing advisory board, and you've just done such a wonderful job sharing your insights and expertise with our stakeholders.
Can I just say something quickly? I want to apologize to Tommy. You were frozen on my screen, so I was trying to save the day. I wasn't mansplaining or anything like that. But apparently you weren't frozen on everyone else's screen.
I thought for a minute, I'm like, I don't look frozen to me. Am I frozen? You read my mind, though. You took right over. It was seamless. You're good.
It's all right. We're all among friends, Dan. Nobody could never accuse you of mansplaining. So let's do this. I'm going to send everybody back to your tables. Okay. So again, turn on your cameras, turn on your mics, and engage. We've heard from past attendees. This is their favorite part of Recovery Connections, learning from others. And our panelists talked about the importance of that. So you're going to go back. I'm going to give you 7 minutes to talk about our first question, and I'll put it in an announcement so you can refer to it. But the question is, where have you been increasing and decreasing your focus in the last 12 months? So share that with the folks at your table and take some lessons from that. Your table mates might be doing some things that you haven't thought of doing. So really dig in. If there are only a couple people at your table and you want to form a larger group, double click to move to any open table. So let's do this. I'm going to send you back, and we'll shoot some announcements your way to keep you on track.